Okay, so I'm doing just kind of more thorough of a once over on the Impala here. And so what I did is I jacked it up and I got the front tire off the ground here just so it can spin. And what I'm doing is doing a check for the wheel bearing and the tie rods. And the way you do that is you typically with a wheel bearing, if you go on the top side, move the tire back and forth, and then for the tie rods, if you go side to side, that's a pretty good indicator of what's going out for you. So if you have any play, you'll be able to feel it. And I have nothing there, so my wheel bearing's fine. But then when I go here on the side, I have quite a bit of play there. So that's telling me one of the tie rods is likely shot, and so that will need to be replaced. I thought that I had that problem for sure when I was test driving it, but now I know for sure after getting it up in the air, so I need to do a little bit of work and then get an alignment after that. So I got the Impala here a little bit up off the ground on some stands here. I was crawling around underneath. So what I was looking at here, got a couple things. First, what I'm seeing, that's a loose bolt. Where is that from? It's actually one of the engine mount bolts. This side was loose, the other side was tight, so that's good at least. One side was on there. And then you see there's a lot of, it's damp, moist I guess. The transmission is leaking somewhere. Haven't been able to pinpoint the exact location, but that's why I've been dumping more fluid into it at least. So that's real nice to have. And this right here, that little loose linkage there, it's tight the way it's held right now, but that's the shifter for that was manually put in by whoever put in this automatic transmission. So that's nice and loose, so that's real fun. But here's a good shot of all the shifting linkages. This is just kind of pushed up out of the way here from the 3 on the tree here. So here's the shifting linkages, and then here's the clutch actually. So that's all there yet. It's just kind of pushed out of the way as much as possible, and it's just where it was. Just a little quick history on where this short block came from, or crate engine came from. This is a 638 casting block, and I did a little bit of research, and that is from like an 88 to 94 type 350 block, just before the Vortec came out. And I was looking on the back, and there's some casting numbers on there. It says it's a 350 block. It's built in 91, so it's a 91 crate engine. So I'd have to assume right around then was when this engine and this transmission combination was put in. So I'm at the rear of the car here, and I got this kind of brought up off the ground to some jack stands, checking the wheel bearings here on the rear end, and they're just maybe just the slightest amount of play there. I could barely even feel anything, but because of that I'm just going to change both of them just to be on the safe side. That's when I noticed this excellent form of body work here. So all the way around on this wheel well here, I looked on the bottom here, and that is hollow in there. What they did was just take a piece of pipe or tubing and bent it all the way around this wheel well to act as a kind of a base, I guess, to put their Bondo onto. You can see all the cracks all the way up in and through there where the pipe is coming away from the body of the car. But that's just kind of an interesting, I've never seen that before, where they just took a piece of metal and kind of shaped it into place and just slapped some Bondo over it. So that's pretty interesting. So this is on the rear drive shaft here, the rear U-joint. So I was looking at this, and this is going to be replaced. But what I was seeing, this U-bolt here wasn't tightened all the way. It's still loose in there. You see there's a little gap in underneath there. So that's loose on that side. And then the bearing on this side, the cap is loose. It's got some play in there. So I got really lucky just even backing it off the trailer, I feel like, that it didn't have a problem with this. That's pretty bad. So when I was underneath this backside working on the fuel tank mount, I saw that these were actually air shocks. So there is a spot where you can fill in the air, put some more air into your shocks, lift the rear end up. That's on the rear bumper. But when I was cutting in here once, I accidentally cut the line, and I expected it to blow air all over me, and there was nothing. So there's a leak in the seal on one of these two shocks. I don't know which one, so I think the best way to fix that is actually just to replace both of them and put a new line on it, because I broke the line. So I'll have to do that as well. So we get to see this fun difference between a somewhat good coil spring and a bad one. This would be the somewhat good coil spring. If you look at it, it holds the car up even, so that's pretty good, I guess, compared to when we get to this side and I see this. There are 3 spacers in there. So what they did was they just put that spacer in between the 2 coils, the 2 levels of the spring there, and twisted it, and that pushed the spring up more. So this spring has obviously failed, but they put these spacers in here to try to do a cheap fix instead of just replacing the coil spring here. So obviously the rear end of this car is pretty rusted out, but if you look at the front end, it's pretty solid actually all the way through. The frame doesn't really have too much rust on it. Some of the components in here have a little bit of surface rust, but these are solid components. They aren't rusted through at all anywhere on the front end. Basically from the rear seat forward, it's really solid, so that's a plus at least for me. So 2 more quick things I figured out about the interior of the car here. One, we have a leak somewhere. I'm not sure if it's on the bottom here, but this is where the water ends up. So it could be from the door seal, from right in there, from the windshield. I'm not entirely sure where, but when I was pulling this on the trailer, I ended up with a bunch of water on the floor right in here. And also the glove box is missing the key or the push button, so it is essentially locked right now. I was playing with it for a minute or so and I couldn't get it, but I will eventually have to open that up and get that set up so I can actually use that. So even with all these problems that I've been finding with the car just kind of as an inspection, I'm just going to be adding that to my list of things to do, I think, because I think first and foremost, I have a 5-speed manual transmission that I bought out of a 94 Camaro, and I'm going to be dropping that into here. So hopefully that's going to go well and without any problems, but if I have to, I don't really have too much of a problem with cutting a hole in the floor here, so I'd do that if I needed to, but that way I have a manual instead of an automatic. It's a lot more fun that way. So that's going to be my first project, and then maybe get all the maybe fix the tie rods and everything before I get it driving too much. So my adapter kit for my transmission just came in here. This is the T5 out of the 94 Camaro. Now, if you know too much about the T5s and the Camaros, you would know that the T5 did not go behind a V8. This is from a V6 Camaro. And also in those years they switched to the Ford bolt pattern. So what I have here, this is an adapter plate that will connect a Ford bolt pattern to a Chevy bell housing. So picked up a Chevy bell housing off Craigslist, came with a flywheel, and this transmission here came off of eBay. But these shafts, the input shaft is actually the same size and dimension as the V8 T5 transmissions, and this is a V6 world class. So in theory it should be a little bit stronger, but I think this is going to work for me just fine with this adapter plate. I checked, it lines up really well right here, and it lines up on the bell housing here. Only problem is I think 2 of the bolt holes are going to be too small for me, so I'm going to drill those out and retap them, but then I should be good to go, putting the Chevy bell housing onto here, and should bolt right up for me then.